Hey guys, I'm so excited to come on and let you know that I have created a free journal template for you. Badasses build boundaries. Boundaries have been essential to me in my healing journey, and I know they can do the same for you. It's when we say no to the things that don't serve us that we're really able to be true to who we authentically are and who we are looking to become. So go into the show notes or go to my website, jessieblois.com, to find the link and download your copy today. Hey, Jenn.
Hey, Jesse.
I'm so happy you're here. You guys, Jenn Kramer is here with me today. And Jenn was introduced to me by a mutual friend, and her story is pretty incredible. And I'm really, really excited that you're here to share it with all of us. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. Jesse, this is my first podcast.
Well, you know what, Jenn, these handful of podcasts are my first podcast.
We can do
So
it. We can do hard things.
we can absolutely do hard things, and we're in this together. Jenn, why don't we just start off by you giving us some background about who you are and kind of what you were doing before we get to what you're doing today?
Okay. I'm Jenn. I am the youngest of 5 kids. There's a huge age gap in my family. There's like 13 to 20 years between me and my older siblings.
Wow.
And
Between the number 4 and then you?
mhm.
Oh,
20
wow.
years to the oldest, 13 to the closest.
Wow.
Yeah. And one of my sister who's closest in age to me actually has a genetic condition that totally affects her development. So that was kind of an interesting part of my story growing up. And then fast forward to post college, my husband and I met. He moved to the same town I'm from to go to college. We met, fell in love, got married, lived overseas in Uganda in East Africa.
What brought you guys there?
We were doing Christian nonprofit work. So he's
Okay.
an engineer. So he was doing clean water and helping build a school. I was running a tailoring business.
Oh.
And I would say, I think it was like 2 weeks after we got to Uganda, I got pregnant with our first child while using contraception. So it was not the intention. And that totally changed the trajectory of our life. We came home and we began working in nonprofit ministry stateside because I was very ill.
You were very ill?
I was very ill during
With
his
the
pregnancy.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we almost lost him during birth, which was like a highly traumatic thing to work through.
Wow.
And that was kind of like this genesis of I had a vision for my life. I thought I knew exactly what I was going to do. I was going to live this very holistic, kind of hippie everything. And medicine saved my son. And then fast forward 18 months later, I had a daughter, and she too is born with a genetic condition, a very rare genetic
So
condition.
not the same as your sisters.
Not the same, completely unrelated. And it's not something that either my husband or I carry. It was a fluke thing that happened at conception. And so that again, like hard left turn, changed our life again. And we lived the first 5 years of her life really in and out of a hospital.
Do you mind sharing what
seeking
the condition is?
Yeah, it's called KMT2B, and I remember it, kick my tush to bed. I remember the geneticist calling me and saying these random letters and numbers, and I was like, kick my tush to bed. Yep, that sounds about right. And it affects her overall development. It has a lot of, so like developmental, like speech, feeding, walking, all those sorts of things, and academic capacities, but it also has a lot of medical, like she was G-tube fed, and she has neutropenia, which is an autoimmune thing where she's missing half of what makes up your white blood cells. And so there's just been like a series of things. And as she's gotten older, certain things have gotten easier, but other things have, the challenges look really different. They're harder in some ways. And she was an insomniac. That was probably the most, other than wrapping my head around everything, that was the hardest part because she really, she only sleeps 90 minutes in a 24-hour period unmedicated.
Wow.
So we're on a really good medicine regime now, but it took a really long time. And she was 3.5 before we even got a diagnosis.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. How old was she when you guys started putting it all together?
Well, we started putting together at 3 months, but our pediatrician didn't really take us seriously. There's like this bell curve of normal, and
Mhm.
he didn't want to put her through unnecessary tests. And it was like at 3 months. And then at 6 months, we asked again. And at 9 months, we asked again. And finally, at 12 months, we said, something is not right. She's 12 pounds. She can't sit up or roll over. She has no teeth and no words.
She was 12 pounds at 12 months, and the pediatrician wasn't pushing for testing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's when we were like, okay, I learned a whole lot about advocacy at that moment. Like, okay, we are done asking. We are going to start pursuing something else. And so we
Yeah.
did, and it sent us on a medical journey. And so she was the 25th person diagnosed in the world with her genetic condition. And so it's not something you can look at and just know what it is. She had to have her exome sequenced, which is a genetic test. And at the time, it was very expensive. It took 6 months for someone to hand sort the results to come up with the results. And now it's
Really?
all automated. It's much more common, which has made it much less expensive. But yeah, it was wild.
And you
And
had a 2-year-old.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's so wild. And then I feel like the advocacy piece of having to advocate for yourself in healthcare is it's just a whole conversation in itself. You
Mm-hmm.
you look to these people for guidance and you trust them. And to not be given what you knew your daughter needed as early as possible. There's a lot of because I'm in the field of speech and occupational therapy and feeding therapy, and there's a lot of wait and see.
Mm-hmm.
Your child's a boy, boys talk later,
Mm-hmm.
or let's wait to see what happens when they're 2 or 3. But it's like, but what if they did need help? Then we just lost a solid year. And
Mm-hmm.
there's no harm from giving.
Yeah, and the statistics on early intervention, like the earlier you
Yeah.
intervene and start getting that therapy, the greater your potential over your entire life.
Absolutely. Get in there when that brain is flexible and malleable and you can start making those
Mm-hmm.
neuronal connections. And when, it's not uncommon, unfortunately, to get 3, 4-year-olds in our clinic and we can't diagnose, but we see children all day,
Mm-hmm.
every day. And we're like, whoa, like what's going
Something's
on
going
here?
on.
And this is the first time the child's been in for services and they should have started at 18 months. And that's
Mm-hmm.
so much support lost.
Yeah.
So, I mean, even though, you started looking for that testing at 12 months though. So, I mean, kudos to you for you have to follow that mommy or
Yes. And
daddy
I would say, like,
intuition.
if you feel like you're not being heard by your provider, get a different provider.
Yeah.
But again, I was looking to my provider for expertise. He was making me feel a little crazy that I was feeling like something was so wrong. And the reality is, some people do put their kids through unnecessary testing, and that's really unfortunate. But in your like mama gut, and honestly, like daddy was even more insistent
Mm-hmm.
that like something is wrong, something's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was wild. And mind you, this whole time, from the time we came back to give birth to Judah all the way through all of Isley's diagnosing, all that stuff, we were working in Christian nonprofits still on an international level. So we lived stateside, but we were traveling around the world as a family. And as
Oh, wow.
Isley got harder and harder, Caben kept traveling for work because he was the director of international operations for this organization. So he was gone like 20 plus weeks a year,
And
and I was
you're
home.
home.
And I was happy to do it. I'm like, this is our calling, this is our passion. Like, it's so fine. You go, babe. I can handle this. And the reality is, I am a fairly high capacity person. And so we just kept going. We kept chugging. We were doing what we thought we were supposed to do. And then that got us to 2018. And we found ourselves on the outside of the organization that we had been giving everything to. And it was so deeply entangled with like our social community, our faith community, our jobs, what we felt like our passions were. And it was just time for a total life reboot. And that is when that gets us to here. So
Yeah.
we
So what happened?
lived like an hour and a half away from here at that time. And so we decided to sell our house. And my husband had grown up here on this farm. So we are now walnut farmers. And at the time,
And
his
you're
parents were
living where? You're in Northern California.
Northern California. So we're about like 40 minutes south of Chico, maybe an hour and a half north of Sacramento. So if you can kind of imagine that. And my in-laws wanted to retire. They were third generation farmers. And so we said, okay, we'll take the profits from selling our house. We are going to move to the farm.
Did he have some um knowledge and experience because he had been raised with his parents doing it, so he kind of understood what he was embarking on?
Yeah.
Did you?
Yes and no. I would say yes and no
Okay.
for him
Okay.
because um his parents obviously had farmed it and worked very hard to like buy the farm from my father-in-law's family. And they were homeschooled. So they were here like all the time as young children. But when Caben was 8, his family moved to Kenya in East Africa and to be missionaries there. And then they moved back. And then he was gone for high school back to Kenya. And
He did high school in Kenya?
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
wild. Which is why he was like, I'm going to live my life in East Africa. I had
Yeah.
myself done a ton of like international travel. I was in love with East Africa before we ever even met. So we really thought like that was our life. We
So you
never
guys
talked about.
really had a similar vision and path
Mhm,
for yourselves before you even came together as a couple.
mhm.
Did you
And
grow
it
up
was
in a
completely
similar
derailed.
church?
We did grow up in similar churches, except he's from the country. I'm from the city. I grew up in a church of like a couple of thousand. He grew up in a church of like 100. So we
Okay.
had a lot of similar backgrounds, but our lifestyles look so different. He was homeschooled. I was public schooled. Um, all this kind of stuff. So he had a lot of experience here on the farm, but that really key time as like a high schooler, eighth grader, high schooler, when you learn how to do more like hands-on repairs and running of tractors, those sorts of things, he was abroad. They were gone. And so he really missed out on those pieces. And to be honest, he was like, I'm never moving back. Like we love vacationing and visiting the farm and seeing grandma and grandpa, but like we are not farmers.
Yeah,
It
I
was
mean, to go from
never in our
Kenya
purview.
to Walnut Farm in between, I mean, I went to Chico, so
Yeah.
I've driven Chico to Sacramento many, many times. It's pretty sparse.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of walnuts, almonds. I mean,
Yeah. It's all ag and very few people. So he was gone 18 years from the time he left for high school. And then he came back and he moved straight into college. He never moved back to the farm. So it was 18 years between when he, yeah, like left here and when we as a family decided, like, we're going to move to the farm. And
how old were the kids at this point?
so Isley was almost 5, which means Judah was about 6.5 because they're only
Okay.
18 months apart. And it was the best decision we ever made, but it was also really challenging. We left our community. It was really hard move for our kids because they had always come to the farm as like a vacation,
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly to live here and like the dynamics are different now. It's like we work here and we live here, and it's not this like Neverland that you go to where grandma and grandpa can stop their whole life for you because you're
Mm-hmm.
there for a weekend. Now it's like they're our neighbors and we get to see them all the time, but it's different. It's totally different. And so it was a transition, but it was literally the best thing we ever did for Isley, our daughter, because she went from living in and out of the hospital all the time
Mm-hmm.
to she's been hospitalized twice since we've lived here in almost 5 years.
What do you attribute that to?
Everything. It was a reboot on who we were as people. We slowed way down. We were outside in the dirt. We went from hosting social gatherings in our house like 3 to 5 nights a week with large groups of people where our children were just like kind of along for the ride, and
Mm-hmm.
daddy traveling and then mommy traveling, and like all these moving pieces to like
Mm-hmm.
we live 5 miles outside of a very rural community, and we were still homeschooling at the time. So our world just became really small in a lot of ways. And we were able to just seek a lot of like inner healing. What felt like the biggest catastrophe in our whole life, we were able to like remove ourselves from and see what a gift it was.
Yeah.
The control that we came out from under was incredibly freeing, but it's also lonely out
I
here
was going to
because we
ask,
don't
did
have this
you,
built-in community.
you went from socializing and being around people to this completely different way of living. So
Mhm.
was it lonely? Did you
Mhm.
get sad and low, depressed?
For me, it was like the biggest gift because I am naturally more of an introvert, but in the church and in the job we had and in the marriage I had, like we just lived very social lives and hosting and leading, like it was just built into who we were.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me to come out here and like I can
Breathe.
choose what we do. It was incredibly freeing, but it was very difficult for my husband and for our older son, our oldest son, um, because it went from, yeah, just people to like lonely, like the trees don't talk back.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it took a while. It took a couple of years really for us to kind of like level out, find our footing. And even still, because Keeban left for high school, he was homeschooled and then he left for high school. And I'm not from here, despite the fact we've been here for almost 5 years, we will kind of still always be outsiders because I'm not best friends with the people that I grew up a block from who I went to high school or kindergarten with. Like
Right.
that's the kind of generational friendships that exist here. And so we found other kind of like outsiders, transplants, and people are so welcoming and kind, but it's friendships are kind of different here. And that's taken me a while to be okay with and navigate. We ended up putting our kids in brick and mortar school and not homeschooling anymore. So that gave us connections. Our
I
kids
was,
are, getting into sports. That gives us connections,
uh-huh.
those sorts of things. So
That's
the
a
loneliness is
huge
still there
change.
in some ways, but um, wow, we are different people for the better.
I think life does that a lot, right? You
Mm-hmm.
think something horrible is
Mm-hmm.
happening, and it turns out to be the biggest blessing.
Yeah.
That's what
Mm-hmm.
happened to us at the start of COVID. The business that I thought I had been creating kind of fell apart with the people that were on my team. And I thought everything I'd poured my life into, or not my life, but like the past 5 years at that point, and missed so much of my kid's childhood, like just trying to grow this. I thought it was done. I thought we had
Mm-hmm.
nothing, everything that we relied on. But what it did is it kind of forced us at the time for my husband to join onto the business with
Mm-hmm.
me. And for us, that was the best thing that could have ever happened to our relationship. And we
Mm-hmm.
never would have come up with that on our own if
Mm-hmm.
COVID hadn't hit. It
Totally.
it forced our hand. And honestly, we were talking about it actually the other day about how I would never want to relive that first year. It was really hard for me. It was really scary. Our son got pretty sick during that time. I would never want to relive it. But looking back, it really did a lot for our family. So
Yeah. It changes everything. My
yeah.
husband and I's dynamic, we were in ministry together, so we were working together. But as Isley got sicker and we were traveling apart more, then it was more time apart. And then when we moved here, one of the beautiful things about farming is you can live seasonally. You work really hard when you need to for the trees, and then there's this time of reprieve. And that was one of the things we were like, we're going to live into seasonality. And after our first walnut crop, we realized that the walnuts were not, the trajectory of the value of walnuts was going down. And that very first crop, we realized like, oh, the walnuts came in at the very bottom of what we had budgeted for. And so it was like, oh, I got to get a job because if this happens again, we would not be okay year over year, right? We only had so many earnings from the sale of our house. There was a finite amount of money to live on. And so I got a job. I became the director of communications for 5 charter schools, a network of 5 charter schools
Wow.
across Northern California. And
That's a big
so,
job.
yeah, it was. And it was very fulfilling, to be honest. It gave me connections with people outside. It was kind of my own thing.
Yeah.
Um, but because it was a classified position, I still worked year round. And so then it was really hard because I was used to being off in the summers when my kids were, or like kind of
Mhm.
that self-employed lifestyle. And so, um, but yeah, that was kind of the thing we did. And at the time, the next year, the second crop we got, was approaching COVID, and the price was even lower than the first year we had uh, farmed. And so Cabin was like, babe, I kind of have this crazy idea. Like, is it okay if I set aside $5,000 and let's just like see if we can kind of launch a side business to supplement our income? And I'm like, okay, sure, great. He's very entrepreneurial. He's a big dreamer. $5,000 at the time felt like a ton of money, but also like so little to start to like bankroll a business and not have to like go get investors and let's just see kind of how it goes. And the idea that we came up with at the time was sprouted walnuts, because we looked around and we said, what do we have access to? Walnuts. I'm allergic to walnuts. Our daughter's allergic to
Are
walnuts.
you serious?
Dead serious.
Wait,
My
can you
mom
touch them?
anaphylactically allergic to them, consuming them. So I can touch them, I can be around them, but you put one in my mouth and immediately like my lips swell up, I get all the little cuts in
I
my
mean,
mouth,
the irony.
right?
The irony in that is so rich. Because I was sitting here listening to you. You said we work for the trees, and I thought, what a beautiful statement.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what an organic, natural way of living. Like, the trees are ready, we go out, we
Mm-hmm.
work for the trees, we're busy, and then the season passes. And this whole time you can't even taste it
I know.
or be a part of it.
I know, but the bummer about having to work, not having to, because I really enjoyed my career in, communications, but um that meant we couldn't live seasonally. Like when the trees were sleeping, my job at the schools was not sleeping.
Right.
And I was still trying to homeschool the kids at the same time. It was wild. So
So what was he doing though
he was
when
farming.
so okay, so what does that mean? So the walnut, he's not working with the walnut. So what kind of farming do you do off
No,
season?
there's always work to be done in the walnut orchard.
Okay,
It's just the level of work that you have to put into it.
got it.
And like the trees don't really care if you stack the brush today or tomorrow, but the trees really care that the brush is stacked and pushed and burned before it's time to irrigate. So it's very self-paced in the
Okay.
winters, particularly. And then in the summers, farming is all based on weather.
Well, and you guys are getting snow right now, I would imagine.
We are not getting snow, but about 15 miles from here they are.
Okay.
We are getting an incredible amount of rain, too much rain,
Too much
which
rain.
is a sad thing to say as a Californian because we have been in a drought.
Yeah.
But the trees cannot consume, the ground cannot consume the amount of water that has been coming down since Christmas. And the flooding and then the runoff, we're not actually able to like capture it the way we would want to.
So does that make you have sleepless nights about what this next season's going to do for you? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
And
you
it's not
really
just the
have
rain
no
in the winter.
control.
Yes. So,
You have
yeah,
to
you're hitting on
relinquish.
it right there.
Yeah.
So, everything about farming is really about the weather, which you have zero control over. And it's a huge, like, humbling, life submitting thing to put all of your effort into something and to not know if you're going to get paid on it or what the quality will be. You can do the best of the best. And there's still so much of it that's out of your control, which is why we started the sprouted walnut business. And we started sprouted walnuts because I had done a ton of homeopathic stuff with our daughter for her health. And we had seen a lot of progression with her because she had lived on antibiotics for so many years that once we moved here, we decided we need to like heal that gut health as much as we can. And so I had already been sprouting grains and nuts and all these different things for her and for our family.
What does that mean, sprouting?
Okay. To sprout a grain or a nut, you're going to soak it in water. Essentially, you're going to kind of trick that seed or grain into thinking that it's going to become a plant. And so what it begins to do is it will push a sprout, and because it thinks it's going to grow a grain, a rice plant, or it's going to grow a walnut tree or an almond tree. Almond, depends where you're from.
Yeah.
I'm an almond person, but I live around
You
almond
live around the
farmers.
almond, but I'm an almond person too. I remember living up there and being like, what's an almond?
Crazy. They say that they're like, they're an almond, this kind of a joke. They're an almond on the tree. And then when you shake them, you shake the L out of them.
Got it.
And then they become an almond.
I'm like, the almond orchards?
I know.
I used to
So
drive
weird.
through them to get to my internship. in grad school. And I was like, oh, the almonds.
The almonds are so pretty. Yes. So when you do that, you sprout something, you soak it, and then you right as it's about to sprout or is beginning to sprout, then you drain the water off and you dehydrate it back down to shelf stable. So you stop the chemical process that's happening. But what happens when you do that is it releases a lot of the things that would be like the protective layer. I'm not talking like the kernel around something, like there's no shell on the walnut when we're sprouting it, but the self-protecting things like the tannins and harsh kind of things that would protect a seed are released, they're washed away, and so they're actually much easier to digest, they're bioavailable, and a lot of the allergens wash away. And so this is how I found out that I can eat sprouted walnuts.
Oh,
And
wow.
so
Okay. So
Caben's
that's what the
idea.
business is. It's the walnuts, but sprouted. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
But they just look like a walnut. People are always like, "Oh, I thought they were going to be like green or yeah." So his idea was like, "Let's take $5,000. Let's design a bomb-ass bag. Let's try selling sprouted walnuts to people because we have them here. It's a value add. It's something we can do. We built a commercial kitchen." And I'm like, "Okay, babe, let's try it." And, we were just selling a couple of bags here and there online. And, mind you, I'm working like 50 hours a week in education. Our children are home not with COVID, but because of COVID, like distance
Mm-hmm.
learning. Caben is farming, and we're just kind of doing the sprouted walnut thing on the side from our kitchen with a cottage license. And a larger Instagram account, um, shared our walnuts, and it like blew our business up in the best ways. Shout out to the governors, because we like literally overnight got 500 orders, had to shut down our website, had to go like 10x our equipment, build a commercial kitchen, all these sorts of things to like fulfill these orders. And
Mm-hmm.
we're like, okay, we're all in. We are doing this. So then now Caven is farming full time. I am working full time. We have our children home, and we have a business that like a new business that we are doing together. And I was doing a lot of the like behind the scenes kind of stuff, and Caven was doing the actual sprouting and bagging and weighing. Like we still to this day do it all by hand, but we have an employee who helps with that part of me. And we said, okay, we're going to try this. And so all the things in our lives were like growing, growing, growing. And so now we're kind of spread really thin. And then Keeman got sick, and he was bedridden that summer for 7 weeks.
What? What did he get sick with?
He got Epstein-Barr and
Oh, wow.
mono, which attacked his liver. He went into early liver failure, and it was serious. And at the end of that, he recovered really well, but his brain was still like kind of foggy.
Mm-hmm.
And his endurance levels were like back to like a normal human instead of like a insane human. Like he can just like go 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 go, or before he got sick he could go 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 forever.
Mm-hmm.
And it put like real limitations on like, no, you can only work 8 or 10 hours in a day, you can't work
You guys
18
are
hours
constantly being told to slow down.
Mm-hmm. And so at the end of that summer, I we looked at each other, and our business was growing, and we either needed to hire a marketing person or someone to like do all the Instagram stuff, because we were selling so much over Instagram. This was really like our unintended marketing was
Yeah.
Instagram. And but that's where the business was. And so I decided to resign from my career and to come work for the business full time. And mind you, we were co-owners the whole
Mm-hmm.
time, but it was like, okay, no, this is going to be my full-time gig. So we're farming, and we have tenderly rooted and not some other job also. And that was kind of it changed everything for us. It was back to us working together, which is so beautiful, but also tricky, because like, are we in husband wife mode right now? Are we in
Yep.
co-owner mode right now?
Yep.
Are we working in your purview where I'm almost more like an employee, or mine? There's so many like kinks to work out as entrepreneurs working together.
So how have you guys, let's talk about that. What have you found to be the biggest challenges
Mm.
working with your husband, and how have you guys navigated
Mm-hmm.
through that?
Well, that's a good question.
It's a loaded one,
Um,
I know.
it's really
But
loaded because we have a lot of respect for each other. He values me equally as I value him. We know our giftings really well. We've been married like almost 13 years, and we've kind of always worked together, but it's different working together for someone else versus business owners. And having an employee brought in another, like, wait, who's telling the employee to do what? So it's a lot of sitting down, looking at the calendar together, kind of making tasks lists of what need to happen, and then divvying them up and then checking back in, but trying to make sure things like we're not doubling up our efforts, but nor are we letting things fall through the crack. And we actually just very recently both read the book Fair Play. I don't know the author, but it's like changing my life, because what we realized is there were still a lot of what she calls the invisible shit you do to keep
oh
a
my
domestic home
gosh,
going
I love that.
behind the
The
scenes
domestic shit you do, it's like everything,
that
right?
default to the mom
Yes.
most of the time.
Yep.
And she started making, like, I was listening, we both listened to it on Audible,
Mm.
the list and list of like all the things that have to be done to maintain a household, to parent children, to like birthday presents, Christmas presents, thank you notes, teacher gifts, teacher communication, who checks the homework. Like, there's just so much that goes into it. And then you add a medically fragile special needs child on top of that. That's like a whole other realm
Well, I
of
was gonna say, I mean,
demand.
when you were talking about you working 50 hours and he's farming and you're doing this, how it's, I know with my two kids, how challenging it was doing COVID home learning.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It was just, it was sad. It was hard to watch. It was frustrating. But you have a medically fragile child on top of that. So
Mm-hmm.
did you have help? Did your in-laws or family or extended, you just
So we
somehow
live,
had a 36-hour day?
right? That's a really good question, Jesse.
You're like, I
If
don't know how I
only.
did it.
In some ways, I look back on like Isley's entire life and I say I don't really know how we've done it, but we've just always made it work. And I will say statistically, like Kevin and I should not have made it. Our marriage should not have made it. When you have a special needs child, like it is just so hard. And then you add all the like
Oh my gosh.
parenting the sibling of a special needs
And the
child,
business
self-employed,
change and self-employed, the business, I
and the like
mean,
deconstruction of everything we came to believe that we were raised in, and then the rebuilding of like, what do we actually believe, what kind of people do we actually want to be, what kind of humans do we actually want to raise. Like, we don't have to just do it the way it was always done in our lives, but we also don't want to be pendulum people that just go the opposite way. It's very complex. And so this book, Fair Play, what she does is she breaks down all the things that have to be done, and she talks about the she fault. Like, the mom is the default, so it's the she fault on a lot of tasks. And so redivvying up those tasks, and some days we swap the tasks daily, and sometimes it's monthly, and sometimes things like I handle all of the insurance. I handle all of the medical appointments and record keeping and medical forms, like those kinds of things. Like, those are my wheelhouse. That falls within my purview. I have always handled the IEPs, but I will tell you, this past year, I asked Kevin, like, I need you to be a more part of the IEP, the individualized education plan.
yeah.
And,
Those, for
it's a
anyone that
whole
doesn't
legal
know,
thing.
those are at school. That's what the school's plan is to care for Isley. It's they meet yearly, if not more often, every 3 years. There's more testing, and it's their legal mandate of how to best care for an individual child that needs extra
Extra support.
support in any area that they need that extra support in. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So we just had, actually, it was her triennial. So it was her third triennial because she just turned 9. And I was just like, I need you to be a part of this. And part of this was because I had another baby, which
Well,
I
I
want to
was
circle
gonna
back
say
to.
we're
I want
gonna
to circle back to it, but
throw it
I
all
want to
in
just
there. There's a third.
I started having kind of these morbid thoughts when I was pregnant of like, I'm older now. What if something happens to me?
Yeah.
I was confident Caven can handle all the things, except I have always owned Isley's care and medical. And he's very like he did the G tube feedings. Like he's in the house, he's very hands-on. But like from the 10,000 foot view, like if I were to pass, he wouldn't know like which doctor do I call for what and where are they? And like that was my thing. And so I was like, I really need you to be a part of the IEP because if something happens to me, granted, I was in a really bad car accident when I was pregnant. And so it kind of
You guys don't catch a
exacerbated.
break.
Jesse, we have a great life, but shit happens.
Shit does happen. And I'm just sitting here kind of jaw on the floor, mouth, like just I'm in awe of you. Just like the way you're talking about all of this and your outlook and you're saying a lot of things that are making me go, yeah, I should probably figure that shit out.
Right. And so it suddenly like was like who he needed to be more involved in that. And he did. Um, yeah. And the medical stuff too, he's like started coming because used to he was traveling. Isley might be in the hospital and he was in India or he was in Nepal or Thailand or,
Just like
like
stop then and you were like, all right, guys, like Isley's in the hospital, dad's gone, we're in the hospital, we'll get to school when we get to school, we'll get to, is that how it had to be?
yeah, we had a really solid community of people who would take Judah and help Judah try to kind of continue on with his life. He came to the farm a lot. That's why I called the farm his Neverland, because if Isley was going to be hospitalized for more than like a day or two, he would come here and grandma would homeschool him. And like, yeah, we had a really great support system. We had a really great support system. So we have made it work, but like every time you move, you have to develop a new IEP with a new SELPA, a whole new team of people. When we moved here, we had to get a new primary care physician who is the one who does all of the referrals for insurance because we moved counties. They wouldn't let us keep our original pediatrician, not our original, but our phenomenal pediatrician that we landed with. So there was
Really?
yeah. Mm-hmm. Our insurance would not allow us to have an out of county CP.
I should really just do an entire episode of how broken
The
our
medical
health
system is.
insurance or our
Mm-hmm.
healthcare system is. Sorry, that's a
Mm-hmm.
tangent, but
Yeah. So during
wow.
COVID, you were asking about what kind of support we had. We do have family around, but we were much more quarantined than other
Oh,
people around us because of Isley's
Isley.
medical condition.
Yeah.
And so it really was like we're in it together. We're just the four of us. We're kind of in it together, and we did a lot of Zoom like hangout with people, but
Hmm.
it was definitely a really challenging time. So it's like, mind you, I always wanted to have, Kevin and I both, we always wanted to have 4 or 5 children. This was our dream. This was our goal. And we grew up in a community that really kind of like idolized. Are we going here? We're going to go here. Okay. We really
Do it.
idolized like adoption.
Uh-huh.
And so we said we were going to have 1 or 2 kids, and I would have my tubes tied, and then we would adopt 2 or 3 more kids. And from the 10,000 foot view, like adoption is such a beautifully broken thing. It's devastating that it's necessary, and yet there's a huge need. So I'm not knocking on adoption at all. But our heart in adoption was that we wanted to grow our family. We wanted to meet our needs, and we would provide a good home along the way. And so when we moved here from the farm or to the farm, it took a little while for us to kind of like stabilize emotionally, go through a lot of deconstructing therapy, self-reflection, a lot of like healing before we finally felt like, okay, maybe we're ready to start the adoption process. So it was 2 years later, we started the adoption process in, I think it was like February or March of 2020. And then the pandemic started,
Hmm.
and all the classes through the county, all that kind of stuff put on hold. So once again, it was like, what? Oh my gosh. And
Hmm.
so during that time, we were like listening to adoptees. We were like really pushing it hard to educate ourselves and realized how wrong our motivations were in it. And And so it just kind of put us back on our heels of like, well, what are our options? Because I had my tubes tied. I couldn't have any more kids.
Oh, you did?
And
Okay.
I had my tubes tied at Isley's birth. And to be honest, it's like probably the biggest regret in my entire life. And it was because I made a decision at the time with the information I had that was the best I could,
Yeah.
but so permanent. And here we were in a completely different life circumstance several years later. And I had mentioned it in small ways to Caben throughout the years, like, I just really regret it. Mind you, I was bedridden for 36 weeks with Judah, and I was bedridden for 25 with Isley, and I had a C-section with both. I had an emergency unconscious C-section with Judah and a scheduled one with Isley, which was much better. And so those were the reasons we were like, no, we like for sure we should. Like, let's not risk this again. We're just going to adopt. But then all of our ethics around why we wanted to adopt changed. And we realized that if we wanted to grow our family, it was on us to figure out how we could do it. It
Oh,
was a dream that was just meant to be dreamt. And so I would say one of my biggest triumphs that I had through this whole like finding my voice, figuring out what I believed, what I wanted, how I was going to contribute to making that happen, is I came to Caben and I let him know in 2021 that like I want to either pursue IVF or getting my tubal reversed.
mm-hmm.
And it was expensive. It was hard. It was risky. And so we started finding a doctor who could help us meet one of those needs. And we ultimately decided to have my tubal reversed. And so I had like a 5-hour open surgery that we paid a lot of money out of pocket for. And I think it has about a like 40 or 50% success rate, but a 25% chance of ectopic pregnancy. We basically said, like, let's try the tubal reversal. And if it doesn't work, then we'll consider IVF or like start pursuing IVF. And so we did. And it was terrifying. It was really hard
What was
because
that recovery like?
it was, it's like it was almost like a C-section. In fact, they opened my whole C-section scar up. And I just kept telling myself, like, it's worth it to pursue my dream. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is so hard, but if we could have another baby, it would be totally worth it. And even if I was bedridden the whole time, it would be totally worth it because we survived our older two's childhood because of
Mm-hmm.
Isley's medical stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I just wanted to see that redeemed and to continue adding babies to our family if we could. And it took 6 cycles, 3 of them with Clomid, which is where it's like a timed ovulation. And
Mm-hmm.
we got pregnant with our son. And he's 3 months old.
Oh, he's so little.
Teary. Yeah, he's tiny. But he's here and he's wonderful. And I'll tell you, I farmed up until the day I gave birth.
Did you? So you
We
had a really good pregnancy.
I had a really good pregnancy. And Jesse, I just so deeply believe that it's because I am a more whole, healed human
Yeah.
being than I was, um,
I
before.
I fully agree with you 1,000%. And I hear what you're saying. I have 2 kids, and my
Mm-hmm.
husband has said from the get-go, his line is we're to and through.
Mm,
Having more has never been on the table for him. I would have 4.
mm,
And with my son, my postpartum was severe.
mm,
I moved us from Northern California to Southern California. Um, when he was 3 months old, my husband had to leave a job that he loved.
mm,
The anxiety and the depression and the thoughts were all consuming. And he was a tricky baby. He never stopped crying. There was just a lot. His delivery was really hard, but I definitely didn't enjoy that time with
mm-hmm,
him. It was survival. And then our daughter came 2 weeks after Adam turned 2, and it was a much easier process, but I had 2 babies, so it's kind of blurry.
mm-hmm.
So, and then after,
And a career.
well, yeah, and that's what I'm gonna say. Then at that point, I was still working in the schools. And then I decided to grow this business. So then I'm like in the trenches when they're 2 and 4 and 5 and 7. And I kind of look back and I'm like, I don't know. I'm so sorry. Like, I think I fucked up. I was so stressed out when I should have been more present. And now they're older and I'm so much more healed over the past handful of years and calmer. And I just always think, and
Mm,
we've talked about it, but um, if I could have a baby now, I just think it'd be such a beautiful experience because I could really be present and really
mhm,
know it's okay. Like I'm going to be okay. The baby's okay. It's okay if the baby's crying. It's okay if I'm up all night, where all those things were really hard for me.
mhm.
It's not on the table. He actually, I'll go
Really
here.
believes
He
it.
has an appointment at 1:30 to go sign paperwork to schedule a vasectomy. Um,
Oh.
so it's done for us. He just turned 40. I turned 40 this month. But my point is, I fully understand
Mhm,
what you're saying. And I think that is a sad part of life for me.
mhm.
Um, Also, my kids don't want another sibling. Like we've had family
Neither did
discussions.
ours.
Yeah, they're like, nope, absolutely not. They are 10 and 8. We do have this whole new world where they're able to live now.
Mhm.
Um, so I've kind of just, come to terms with it's okay. I have two healthy, beautiful children. I'm very grateful for that. Um, but yes, I will always have sadness that I wasn't a
Mhm.
calm, present mommy at the beginning because I didn't get to just snuggle into that. My best friend actually from Chico, we met, we were roommates, um, has always known she was going to adopt.
Mm.
And they adopted, they got matched with the birth mom and they were told they were going to have a baby at the end of April. And then they got told, actually, she's measuring big. She's due in February. And there's two. So they just had their baby girls born January 19th, twin girls, and I'm gonna go snuggle on them next weekend
Oh
for
my
my sixth
gosh.
there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so they ended up with twin girls, identical.
Oh my gosh, that gives me the
I
chills.
know it's a beautiful story, so I'll just go love into that.
Yes, yes. And see, I think for me, Hartley Wilder is our
Oh,
youngest. He has healed something so deep inside me that I didn't even know was
yeah,
missing or there. I knew the longing was there, but yeah, I was scared though because I'm 37 and like statistics get worse the older you get
right. You're
for like
geriatric at 35, right?
thank you, geriatric
Yeah, geriatric.
pregnancy.
It's a nice
Mhm,
term.
mhm.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and so I think for me, the going through the process of doing the tubal reversal was such a healing thing between my husband and I because he was the one who was very adamant, like, no, we are done having kids. And I was the good wife who was like, okay, okay. And so it healed something between us for me to be heard
hmm
and then to take these like huge sacrifices and risks for us to do
hmm
it and to trust together that it was going to work out. And if it didn't, that we were also willing to try other things. And so that was really beautiful for us. And then Hartley has been a huge struggle for our oldest. He was like, I don't want to have any more babies, mom. Like, I'm done. I begged you for years to give me more siblings. You didn't. And of course, he's 11, he doesn't have the perspective that, like, no, you don't understand. We didn't know if your sister was going to live and we couldn't. Like, we were surviving. We were
Oh,
barely surviving.
yeah,
We couldn't have given you more siblings when you were younger. It took us being like different people in a different life before we had the capacity to do it again. And we went into it with very open eyes because once you have a special needs child or a medically fragile child, you see the underbelly of like what can happen and how hard it is. And so bringing another child into the world, like even though statistically another baby wouldn't have like a higher chance of having Isley's condition, it's just like how hard it can be if it doesn't go well or it doesn't go the way you expect.
yeah,
And again, I like knew in my soul and Kevin was on board. And so we did it. And the reality is we would like to do it once more.
yeah.
Not because I want to be pregnant again or have another C-section or any of that, but our oldest two are 9 and 11. And then we have a 3-month-old. And so I would like to, because
Yeah.
of the age gap that I
Yeah.
had in my
You know
family,
what? In
I want to have
my
another. So he's
I
not
love
like an
that.
only
My
child.
sister's 3.5 years younger than me, but my brother was born the day before I turned 12.
Oh,
And then my parents divorced when he was 18 months. So it was really just him.
mm-hmm.
And I think it would have been a very beautiful thing if he had
For
had
him to have.
somebody with him. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
So again, like it's a 10, it's like 10 months, but it's really like 2 years, because you have like the conceiving, the trying to get pregnant, the wondering if it's going to stick, the enduring a whole pregnancy, the having a C-section, the recovery, and then like that year of postpartum of just like getting your body back and
That's
still
the hard
sustaining
part.
a baby.
That's really, Ben has always said like he would have three and he would have four if they came out at 1 year old, because it's
Mm-hmm.
that first year for us at least, we don't
Yeah.
thrive. We don't. And
Yeah.
I can't argue that. Like, I'm not the wife that's like, I got it, you sleep. I'm like, get the fuck up. We're in this
Help
together.
a mama out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna feed, you're gonna change, and you're gonna rock back. Like I just we're in it together. So
Mm-hmm.
um it's hard. I feel like I see twins for you next time.
Okay, Jesse, I've thought so much about that.
I
Like,
feel like it's gonna be twins. You're gonna have to keep me updated.
okay, wait, are you manifesting this for me right now? Because you might need to back that up.
I feel it in my soul that you're gonna go for one more and it's gonna be two.
This is a scary thought for me, because that might, I mean, we would make it, right? This is what I've learned. I can reinvent, I can pivot, I can handle a lot more than I think is humanly possible. And I can find joy in it. I can find gratitude in it. I can thrive in it. And that sounds like a lot.
Ugh, it does sound like a lot, but from everything you've just told me, I feel like you could totally do this. I feel
Our
like the
son would
title
be
of your
very upset.
episode needs to be like the triumph in pivoting or the joy in pivoting, because your life, I mean, your
Mm-hmm.
story is really just commendable and beautiful. The
Mm-hmm.
fact that you guys have really been given obstacles that the average person just doesn't have, and you've been
Right.
given more than one,
Mm-hmm.
and just to continue to see life through all that get better for you
Mm-hmm.
and more beautiful, and your marriage still intact, and the fact that you wanted more and he supported that. It sounds like you guys are just really, really a solid
Mm-hmm.
support system and unit. And I don't know, I think
Yeah.
it's almost not that I think challenges should keep coming, but it's almost like a challenge comes and you not only do you meet it head on and tackle it, but like you grow something beautiful out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Really incredible.
Thank you. It's
It
been a
really
lot.
is.
I have a couple of like mantras that have come out of this long season. And one, I would say, like, I have, because Instagram prefers women over men, the
Oh.
algorithm does.
Mm.
Um, I have unintentionally become the face of our brand. And that's a huge stretch for me, because, holding a camera and talking about the stories and
Mm-hmm.
those sorts of things, like it's just like way outside my comfort zone. And yet I literally do it every day. And I have made like friends over the internet. Who would have ever thought? Um, and so kind of what's come out of that has been this pouring into like developing myself, business coaching, personal development, finding like my attitude of gratitude, looking for the good. Like it's really changed my whole perspective. And I would say, like, I always say both and. It's not homeopathic or prescriptions. It's both and. It's the best of both worlds in whatever way we need. It's not, let's see, I had a couple of different ideas. I don't even know. It can be really hard, and I can find joy doing it. That's
Yeah.
probably like the crux of it, is like I would never wish upon anyone a medically fragile child. And Isley is magic. She has broken us, brought us down to our bare bones, and she is like the best gift in the whole wide world. Having a baby at 37, really hard. Taking a risk and not knowing if it's going to work out, really hard. And we can go for it. and we can fail. It's like, as business owners, I'm sure like there's a lot of swings and misses,
Yep.
but there's also a lot of swings and like,
Yep.
what's that called when it leaves the park?
Home
Home
run.
run. Home run. We're not sports people.
I
I'm not a
love that we
baseball
made a
person.
sports reference.
Like we can do the hard things and we can acknowledge that they're hard. Like that's another thing I've had to overcome, is this like sense of control and perfectionism and making everything look good and not trying things unless I know I'm going to excel at it, to like, I can try things and I can learn new things and it's okay if it doesn't go well. It's
It is okay.
okay.
And it actually, I think the not putting out the perfectionism and
Mm-hmm.
showing where you struggled and being vulnerable, really,
Mm-hmm.
it just allows you to be easier to connect to, easier for others to relate to you, easier to um, allow others to hear and see you or your story or your struggles and feel safe in that and seen in that,
Mm-hmm.
and to use your journey as a way to heal themselves
Mm-hmm.
if they're, coming up on something you've already gone through.
Yeah. And that's the thing. There's so many faux pas about special needs stuff, or should you talk about your kids on the internet or should you not, and how to be honoring and how to be um, triumphant and vulnerable all at the same time. I came out of an intense like toxic positivity culture, which was like, you can't talk about the negative, you can't talk about, like, everything's going to be okay, it doesn't matter that your daughter's in the hospital and may not live, like, it's going to be good, like, it's all for his glory. Like, there are all these things we came out of that are really toxic. And no, like, this is hella hard and I'm going to keep putting my foot in front of the other.
Yeah, I'm not going to give up, but it's shitty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that I would, like, if I could impart any piece of wisdom, who am I? But like,
No,
I
oh
would
my gosh, are you
say,
kidding? You are another, at like what we said at the beginning, you are a human and you have
right.
lived a story and you're only 37. So
Yeah.
share
Okay.
your
I would just
wisdom.
say, like, listen, like, try to be in tune with your gratitude and with like who you are and what you want in the world, and believe the good and know that it's going to be hard. I would say be willing to take swings and misses and to be really honest about it with yourself and
Yeah.
honest with your partner, honest with a friend. If you have an Instagram community, honest with your Instagram community. And just to know, like, it's okay that life looks like this. You don't have to make it look like this all the time when really it feels like it's this, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. What she did is ups and downs.
Oh, yeah. Sorry for the people not
Life is ups
like,
and downs. It's not flat and sometimes it's decreasing. Jenn, I really wish I could hug you right now.
air
This
hug.
conversation has done a lot for me personally, in my
Mm,
heart and my soul. So I'm so happy we
thank
were
you.
introduced and connected to each other. I wish I lived closer to you because I'd come over right now.
Let me know when you're in Chico. Wait, are you coming to Chico to meet the babies?
No, they're
Oh,
in
they're not in Chico.
Oakland.
Okay.
No, Chico is so amazing and beautiful, but it's so far from everything.
Mhm. It
If it
really
wasn't, I probably would have
is.
made my whole life there, to be honest with you. I love it. We love it. My husband and I met
Mm.
there. Did I tell you that?
Oh, okay.
We were neighbors in college. Um,
Oh.
I love Chico. But yeah,
Well, I
just
have one more thing. One
yeah,
more thing I want to say.
please.
Like, it's never too late to reparent yourself, and it's never too late to repair and reparent your children.
Yeah,
I think it's like, these are huge, I'm like preaching to the choir. Like, no, I'm preaching to my own heart. Like,
yeah.
it is never too late to do something different. Um, and to do something different, even with the kids that are still in your house. Our
Yeah.
kids have watched us go through an incredible transformation, and we've been honest with them, and there are things we have to apologize for.
And you know what? How beautiful is that? That they're along for that journey.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've done a lot of boundary setting this past
Mm-hmm.
year. It's really big for me
Mm-hmm.
right now, and it includes certain family members, and my kids are witnessing it. And we
Mm-hmm.
talk about it. We talk about why, and we talk about what they are, what they don't have to allow in their life, and how they should treat others. And my point in all this is, it's beautiful to let them watch your journey and to continually reparent yourself. Let them watch
Mhm.
and let them share in your thought process once they're old enough so they understand and they see you as a human, right? And that
Yeah.
allows them to be human.
Yes. Yes. There are things like, oh, I wish I could have learned this 30 years ago. I wish I could have learned this 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But here I am. So
Mhm.
I'm doing the
And
best
how
I can
beautiful to
now.
have a parent that self-reflects and
Mm-hmm.
adapts and wants to always just work on themselves.
I was going to say, and I haven't arrived. That's the other thing my kids know.
No.
Like, my goal is to be a lifelong learner. If I think that what I think is true right now and is best right now is still the same in a decade, like, I'm not learning.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's kind of, it's so true how many people can't do that or
Mm-hmm.
don't do that. It is what
It's
it is.
scary. It's scary.
And it's painful.
But the more you do it, the more you have confidence that, like, it's okay if it's a swing and a miss, and really, like, know better, do better. You have to learn more to be able to
I
do better.
Yeah, my biggest wish for them is that they learn through watching us that it's okay to make mistakes, but it's not okay to blame others for your mistakes. It's okay to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay to self-reflect. It's okay. I'm going to do better next time. But the
Mm-hmm.
point is to keep going,
Mm-hmm.
keep self-improving. Don't let other people's negative talk about you become your identity, and stay true to yourself, but always, always, always be willing to look at yourself
Mm-hmm.
and who you are, who you want to be, how you want to navigate through this world, and just really just put like be into that, be present with that, and continue to evolve.
Yeah. And
And
to
if you see
repair.
toxicity,
Mm-hmm.
change it. You
Yeah.
don't have to
Toxicity,
live it.
go. Yes. Yeah. And to repair with those people whom you need to, and to be at peace when you can't. There's certain things you can't fix,
Yeah.
and you
And that's
just have to
hard.
be okay.
That's
Mm-hmm.
really hard. Jen, thank you
Thank
so
you,
much for
Jesse.
talking with me. Your story is absolutely um heartbreaking and beautiful all at the same time.
Thank you, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
And I can't wait to try your walnut.
I know, I'm going to send you some. Okay, sprouted walnuts, best snack you ever eat,
I'm so
and they're good for
excited.
you. So I'm going
I'm
to
so
send you some.
excited. You're the best.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right.
Have a good one.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.